Boogiepop is a strange word, and it's met with an even stranger franchise. What started as a light novel franchise eventually found its way to TV in the form of two animes and a movie. Today we'll be talking about the anime from 2000 called Boogiepop Phantom. The light novels seem to be pretty important in terms of understanding a lot of Phantom, but a quick Google search can help you fill in the blanks. Boogiepop Phantom is a beast in its own, as it's an original story taking place between the first and sixth novel. Sadayuki Mirai, the writer of Perfect Blue, developed the concept and screenplay of the anime. It has the original author Kuhei Kudano involved in the plot as well. On top of that, we have Shigeyuki Suga, the key animator for Serial Experiments Lane, on board as well. He tries to emulate the art style of Koji Ogata, who is the illustrator of the novels. After watching the first episode, the average viewer is going to be horribly confused. I forgot how confusing the show could be at times. It isn't helped by the off-putting presentation and jumbled scenes throughout the episode. I would compare it to Technolize or Serial Experiments Lane in terms of presentation and overall feel. It's another one of those series that rewards you if you pay attention. As far as what I've heard, it functions like the novels, where the reader has to put the pieces together. The first episode is in a typical Japanese high school, but there have been some strange occurrences happening around town. Several disappearances have been happening all over, and a rumor of a Shinigami named Boogiepop. As we're introduced to our main character, Moto, we can see that she's a quiet and insecure girl. This is in stark contrast to her friend Yasuko, who has become a confident and outgoing person. She used to be partners with a guy called Saotome, who ends up being one of the people who disappears. Eventually, she meets him again, but he's been changed into some type of man-eater that preys on vulnerable people. Saotome is from the novels and was a pretty disturbed and sadistic person. It's a pretty unsettling scene with the grimy-looking streets and the excellent sound direction. You might have noticed by now, but there's this sepia filter over the show by default. The reasoning behind this is to give the show a bit more of a sickly-looking feeling to match the character's mental state. This show masters atmosphere by its use of these effects. This is also where we meet Boogiepop, and I really like the design of the character. It stands out in comparison to the rather bland looking cast. It evokes so much mystery and almost has a fantastical element about it. The meat of this episode lies in the core of Boogiepop's themes, which is change and perception. By the end of the episode, Moto doesn't really change at all and still hates herself. Everything kind of goes back the way it was, even after Boogiepop says to forget about Saotome. The title of this episode is Portraits from Memory, which is a reference to the Bertrand Russell book by the name of the same title. I've never read the Bertrand book, but in relation to memory, we can see Moto constantly reflecting on her past throughout this episode. She seems stuck and fixated on her behavior and her crush on Saotome. Even after Saotome is revealed to be completely changed, she goes back to her self-loathing ways. This is something we will see in characters throughout the show, where they change and some of them don't change. It's very realistic to life in that way. The show also doesn't preach on whether one should or shouldn't change. It's left in an ambiguous fashion. The second episode is one of my favorite episodes in the series based on the intro alone. The opening is one of the most perplexing things that I've ever watched. The music perfectly captures the insanity happening before our eyes. Words can't describe how uncomfortable it is seeing our main character gleefully devour a bug. This person in question is Hisashi, who has a long-standing dream of being a hero. This episode poses a pretty interesting question to whether or not it would be better if bad memories were to be left intact. As Hisashi continues his quest ridding people of their bugs, he quickly finds out he's just been snatching their memories. He may view himself as a hero, but a lot of these memories are part of who these people are. Imagine if you could just strip away your bad memories. You might not even end up being the same person you are today. You're not just simply moving on from things, you're completely erasing that part of your life. Change in some situations is not always a good thing. Many of the characters in this show, like Hisashi, are symbolic of a lot of issues throughout society as a whole. I think he might be suffering from some type of white knight syndrome here. I'd imagine after his mother's death, this only exacerbated his desires, and now he can act them out on other people. Interesting enough, he ends up running into Moto from the first episode. This is another unique element from Boogiepop Phantom, as we'll be running into many characters from past episodes and future ones as well. This fills in the blanks and gives context for some of the situations. It's kind of cool, but it makes it so you have to watch the show in a couple of sittings, or else you might end up forgetting some of these moments. We also get more things in this book like Nagi Kirama and Manicore. The Manicore, for some reason, is now taking the form of Boogiepop, hence where we get the name of the show, Boogiepop Phantom. Now we get to episode 3, ironically named Life Can Be So Nice. It's taken after a song by Prince, and if you're a fan, you'll pick up on other names here as well. It's kind of strange how many names are taken from Prince songs in this anime. Anyways, I'm sure we've all met someone in life that seems to live in denial. In this case, it's our main character, Misuzu. One of her friends named Panaru has influenced her way of thinking by accepting the world the way it is. On the surface, this mentality might seem okay, but as the episode goes on, you can see how flawed this mentality really is. This way of thinking, I think, is very common in our world, and I don't think it's very healthy. There's a level of toxic positivity to it, and it's almost like you become indifferent to the way the world is. What happens when there's a form of injustice or cruelty? You can only keep the wool over your eyes for so long. At a young age, she seems unable to cope with the harshness of the world, so she adopts her friend's motto, until it's revealed later in the episode that her friend Panaru was murdered by Saotome. The Manicore continues to break down her facade until she is completely mentally broken. As the Manicore states, she's been lying to herself the whole time. This is made evident by her constantly seeing visions of Panaru, even after she's been long dead. I feel pretty bad for her because I can relate to her way of thinking. When I was younger, I just tried to take everything as it is, including very traumatic things as well, but as I got older, it became hard to be indifferent anymore. The final scene in the episode is one of the most disturbing in the whole series, as Misuzu wanders the streets hopelessly while this uncomfortable music starts playing. The sound director for this show was Yoda Soroka, and I have got to give him props on this because he makes every scene a lot creepier. Unfortunately, a lot of the tracks in the show don't end up on the official soundtrack to my disappointment. Episode 4 was always an episode that I would zone out on when I originally watched the show, but after paying attention this time, it left me feeling very disturbed. This is arguably one of the most relevant episodes in the show. Another central theme that we'll see throughout Boogiepop is escapism. A lot of anime at the time were discussing the effects of running away from reality as the internet came about. This was actually a cultural phenomenon in Japan known as internet heisei anxiety. Its main concern is the disconnect brought about by the internet. This is becoming more and more relevant in our culture as time passes. This episode even features things like AI girlfriends and the effects that can have on your social life. It's almost prophetic in a way. It's also a commentary on addiction as our main character, Yuji, ends up getting hooked on a drug called Type S. Yuji seems pretty disconnected from reality at the beginning and maybe not that mentally stable. People don't really seem to care about him, including his own parents, as his dad calls him a moron. This lack of care and ill treatment makes him more susceptible to hiding away from society and falling into the hands of addiction. It is kind of hard to feel bad for him, though, considering what he does throughout the episode, because, God, this guy is creepy. Episode 5 is an episode that can quickly become overwhelming, especially if you're new to the Boogiepop franchise. This is why I highly recommend reading the light novels first before watching this anime. If you've already read these novels, then you've probably heard of the Toa organization. If Boogiepop represents change and moving forward with your life, then the Toa organization represents staying stagnant. Their name in Japanese literally translates to permanence or eternity. They seek to eliminate any chance of evolution and control it. This might be a bit of a reach, but I wonder if the yin yang symbol on Boogiepop's outfit is symbolic of the struggle between good and evil in this context. If you're new to Boogiepop, I strongly recommend paying attention to the conversations with Morita because it reveals a lot of the background information on Boogiepop. This is the first episode that breaks away from the single character format. We are constantly shifting perspectives and being introduced to new characters. The new ones are mainly Monica and Toka. Monica is what's known as an MLPS, or an evolved human that the Toa organization are trying to stop. Toka is the host of Boogiepop, which we can tell by her using the exact same cadence and voice later on in the episode. I guess the most interesting part of this episode is the conversations with Morita. His gradual shedding of his facade is interesting, and it's also fascinating to hear his perspective on the Toa organization. His reveal as Snake Eye is creepy with the body horror, and it's completely on point. The whole episode feels fairly grounded up to this point. When he decides to twist his neck, though, it's completely different. I find his reasoning for telling his subordinate this information to be chilling, as he states that even composite humans get bored. It's creepy to think about how human and simultaneously inhumane this person is at the same time, especially with how he kills people like poor Misuzu. Episode 6 is a bit harder for me to talk about. Not only is the subject matter fairly touchy, but I don't relate to it as much. Shizu has been put forward in a pretty traumatizing situation with her boyfriend seemingly raping her and seeing her mother having sex with another man after her husband has passed away. There's a lot of pain that comes with being a woman in life, and seeing how Shizu keeps herself afloat in such a mess is astonishing. I feel like the anime is also making some commentary on mental health and how unhelpful the medical fields are when it comes to things like this. Both the doctors that she encounters seem very unhelpful and rude towards her condition. I'm not really sure if telling her to just slap a smile on her face is a good piece of advice, but it keeps her mom going. It's reminiscent of Monika's mother's advice to Shizu. Shizu and her mother put on strong fronts for each other. It makes it more tragic as she can see visions of Shizu occasionally, but it's too late to reconcile. Episode 7 covers a very dysfunctional pair of siblings, and I find it a bit boring to be quite honest. It's probably the easiest episode to understand of the bunch, but that comes at the cost of being not as compelling. Although the twist ending is pretty interesting, the rest of the episode just didn't click with me as well. The brother on the surface might seem pretty messed up, but the one actually pulling the strings is his sister. I think it says a lot about her, especially what she did with that cat earlier on. She will literally go to any length to protect her own brother. Her brother is also usually seen throwing up after Sayako uses her powers. Snake Eye also dies in this episode, and I felt pretty disappointed because I wish there was more of him. The idea of a TOA agent, especially in the role of a cop, had a lot of potential. An interesting tidbit about this episode is that it's named Until You're in My Arms Again, and that's a reference to the backing band of Prince. Also, a character named Spooky Electric from the book appears, and yeah, his name is also a reference to a Prince song. Nagi has had little involvement in the anime so far, but in episode 8, this is where we get to see more of her. This episode mostly provides more context for the Boogiepop novels and why things are occurring now. There's an interesting conversation in this episode about memories. A lot of the antagonists from previous Boogiepop novels have come back in the form of phantoms. In other words, they're like memories clinging to some form of relevance. It's like a form of trauma or PTSD with memories constantly coming back to haunt you. Nagi is also a pretty traumatized person herself. One of her friends, Shinpei Kuroda, ends up dying, which leads her to want to become a defender of justice like him. Interestingly enough, Nagi also pairs with Kishida, who also looks like her former friend, Shinpei. She is also seen reminiscing about her past in the episode too. She even talks to Kishida like a former lover. In this episode, Nagi also runs into Monika's mother, and she has short term memory and brain damage. Brain damage has served as a plot point in the show quite frequently. Many of our characters in the show have tried to suppress or rid themselves of their bad memories unsuccessfully. In episode 2, we can see the effects of losing one's memory. They're almost left in a state much like the woman with brain damage. This highlights how important our memories are, regardless of how awful some of them may be. They are the driving part of change in our lives. Episode 9 is a very hard hitting episode, and if you're an adult, you understand it even more. We shift between three characters in an episode, and it all comes down to having their dreams and hopes crushed by the world. When you're young, you have all these hopes and aspirations, but as time passes, many of these things may or may not be possible. In Saki's case, she brutally got her dreams crushed by an unlikable professor. Many people in life are not capable of doing the things that they want. This leads them to try to escape reality. For the characters in this episode, this escape is Poom Poom. We're going to talk more about him later, but there's a quote in this episode that hints at his nature. When people get older, they forget the things important to them in life. Obviously, this was referring to people's dreams. It's a very profound message from the show, and this episode leaves me feeling more grim than the rest of them. Episode 10 explores Poom Poom and his mission to remind adults of what they've lost. Poom Poom's plans might seem very innocent and well meaning, but it's basically just another form of escapism, which means that all of his friends are being blinded from reality. We can see the consequences of this with several people that he's met. I really like the interaction between Poom Poom and Boogiepop at the end of the episode. Boogiepop views what Poom Poom is doing as a way for people to avoid change and tears down his facade. It almost mirrors Misuzu and the Phantom's conversation. Of course, since Poom Poom is nothing more than an electromagnetic creation, he's not taking it in a very emotional way. Nagi's confrontation with Poom Poom is also insightful as we see more traumatic moments in her life. She has a burning desire to do what she does alone. She pushes people away out of fear of harming them. I wish we got more episodes with Nagi because she is an interesting character, but most of the show is delegated to other people. Episode 11 is a real tearjerker on many accounts. As we walk through Monika's backstory, you can't help but to feel bad for her. It showcases the tragedy of her home life and the problems that come along with being a more evolved from other people. It does end on a more bittersweet note as Monika passes her memories to her mother before fading away. The episode also has so many great music tracks, and guess what? They're not on the soundtrack. There were some problems that I have been meaning to voice for a while now, but I'm not sure if it's because I haven't read the books or not, but there are things that I thought needed a bit more of explaining. How exactly does Echo's Pillar of Light bring Monika back to life? It's not really explained outside of the fact that Echoes is part of her now. Now that we're getting close to the end of the show, it does feel incredibly satisfying to piece the story together and have it make much more sense. I wish more anime existed like this now, where you have to pay attention and are actively rewarded for doing so. The final episode is actually quite happy in comparison to the rest of the anime and wraps up quite nicely. I think it's fitting with the theme of change that all the characters are now graduating school. With the electromagnetic field distortion gone, it literally feels like the dark cloud has been lifted from the city. The sepia filter is gone, for example. Overall, I'm glad that I decided to revisit this series with a better understanding now. Many of the show's messages have touched me deeply and made me think in a different way. I'm not gonna lie, the first time I watched this show, I thought it was just a trippy and creepy ride, but there's so much more to appreciate. I hope my retrospective has done some justice in showing more people why this franchise deserves more attention. Thank you for watching.